Yeah! I got it. I got it.
Okay, so we're going to look through scoring guidelines for this question from the 2018 exam. This was a probability question. You can see me do this question in this video. So first thing you'll see in the scoring guide, and these are all available online on the College Board website, they tell you what the point of the question was, and then they give you the solution, and that's where you can check to see if you just got it right or wrong. Honestly, that's probably all you really need to look at, but after that, they will show you how it was graded. Okay, so now when you're grading an AP statistics question, you give each part of the question an E for essentially correct, P for partially correct, or I for incorrect. At the end of the question, after you've graded all the parts, you add up how many E's, P's, and I's you got, and then it'll give you a score on each question out of 4. That does not correspond to a 4 on the exam overall. You don't actually need to get all 4s on the free response in order to get a 5 on the exam. Google AP Statistics exam, what do I need on the free response? And you'll find a bunch of calculators on the internet. I usually tell my students to aim for mostly 3s, maybe 1 4 thrown in there, but aim for mostly 3s. On this particular question, to get a 3, you have to get 2 parts essentially correct and 1 part partially correct. So let's go through the parts. Part A, you get essentially correct if the probability is computed correctly and work is shown that includes correct numerical values using a formula and results from a tree diagram or some other appropriate strategy. Okay, so if we look at my work, yeah, I got the right answer and I showed my work. That one's pretty easy. Okay, you can see you get partially correct if you have a reasonable strategy, such as a tree diagram, but you use 1 or more inappropriate values. So pretty generous. Like if you make the tree diagram and then you don't quite do it all correctly, you can get partially correct, which is pretty nice. You also get partially correct if you don't show enough work. And then incorrect if you don't, if you don't do those things. Okay, B, essentially correct if the probability is computed correctly with work shown that includes appropriate numerical values for both numerator and denominator. Okay, we did that, we got it right. Partially correct if it includes a numerator and denominator in calculating the conditional probability with 1 appropriate term. Okay, so if you get half of it, you're good. Just as a reminder, they're talking about this calculation here. So if you got the numerator right, but the denominator wrong, you'd be fine. And they are pretty nice. Appropriate values include incorrectly calculated values from part A. So if you get part A wrong and you use it in part B, it doesn't count against you twice. Rare moment of grace from the College Board. Okay, or you get incorrect. Okay, and then part C, that was the binomial part. As you can see, there's a lot more here. Essentially correct if you have these 5 things. Use a calculation based on the binomial distribution to find the probability. Check. Specifies appropriate values for N and P. That's what I mentioned in the video where I did the problem. You have to say what N and P are. I did it twice. I did it here, and then I think they would count this as identifying N and P as well, I think. Okay, so check. 3, uses correct endpoint values for the probability. That's just like, when I did binom CDF, I put in 2. So check. Uses correct direction to calculate the probability. Okay, I didn't do binom CDF 3 because it was supposed to be greater than 3, and binom CDF 3 would have been less than 3. So how to use binom CDF basically. And then 5 correctly calculates it. Okay, so they broke down the calculation into 5 steps. You have to get all 5 steps to get essentially correct. Partially correct if the response satisfies component 1 and only 2 or 3 of the other 4 components. So if you knew that it was binomial, but then you only had 2 or 3 of the other things, like you started the calculation, but maybe you had the endpoints wrong or you misused binom CDF, you could still get partially correct. Or, oh, interesting, if you do 2, 3, 4, and 5 correctly, but you make no indication that it's a binomial distribution, then you get partially correct. It seems to me that if you write binom CDF, that should count. As you can see, there's lots of notes, so let's read through the notes here. Okay, you can use incorrect values from part A and B. An unlabeled numerical value in a calculator statement cannot be used to satisfy a component. So that's what I mentioned in the previous video. You have to label what you're typing into your calculator. A response which calculates less than or equal to 3. Okay, you're misusing CDF there. Can't use a normal approximation. They've got some notes here about if you do something really wrong and transcription errors. Okay, so I think it seems to me like writing this identifies it as a binomial scenario. I mean, I guess I did write the word binomial here too, so I think we're good. I think that would be essentially correct, but even if it wasn't, let's say we got P on that part because we didn't say this is binomial. We have 2 essentially corrects and 1 partially correct, so that'd be a 3. And that's what we're aiming for. We just want 3s on as many of these as possible, maybe a 4, but hopefully lots of 3s. So as you can see, there's some reasons to look into the scoring guidelines. It can help you think like a grader, but don't get too hung up on the details. I think if you have limited time to study, it's better to just practice a lot of problems. And when you look at the scoring guideline, just look at the solutions to see if you got it right. Don't get too into the weeds if you're short on time.